Welcome to the Sales Legend Podcast, the #1 podcast for inspiring sales leaders and professionals who are eager and hungry to become sales legends.
Welcome everyone to your Sales Legend Podcast. My name is Domenic Presutti, founder and CEO of L2L Coaching, a high-performance sales leadership training organization. We're all about creating phenomenal and legendary growth and value for sales professionals, business owners, entrepreneurs, sales teams, and entire organizations, helping them create phenomenal and legendary sales cultures and sales results. We're also the creators of the 10x10 Sales Legend Growth Model, creators of the Sales Legend Scorecard, and creators of the 8-Step Sales Legend Training Program. Becoming a sales legend is possible for everyone with the right training and learning. A sales legend is a sales professional who masters the art of connection, the art of discovery, and the art of closing. Today, I have the privilege of having with me an expert in the area of closing the sale. Our goal is to bring value to you through the insights of industry leaders. My guest today is Robert Gervais, Global President at Corporate Connections Global. Robert is one of the founders of Corporate Connections and has served as its global president since January 2017. He is passionate about the power of connecting leaders across the globe and making a difference in people's organizations, communities, and lives. Prior to Corporate Connections, Robert founded and served as president and CEO of ZeroFail, a technology company that he grew from startup to multinational prior to selling in 2015. Robert received his MBA from the John Molson School of Business, a certificate in franchise management from Georgetown University, a BFA from the Concordia University, and is a certified franchise executive. Robert taught business strategy and entrepreneurship at a leading Canadian university. He is a strong proponent of giving back to the community and has served on several boards. Welcome, Robert. It's a true pleasure having you today as our guest.
Hi, Dominic. It's great to be here. It's great to see you, and I'm really happy to spend a few minutes with all of you.
So, Robert, today we will be discussing about the importance of how being an expert in closing the sale efficiently is critical for any sales professional. Before we talk about the importance of closing the sale, I do have a few questions I would love to ask you.
Sure. Please go ahead.
So, Robert, being the global president of Corporate Connections, please make us understand what is Corporate Connections and who are your members?
Sure. So Corporate Connections is a member-based organization or platform for owners, business executive, and leaders of about the top 5% of companies around the globe. When we say top 5%, we're really referring to businesses that have 5 million and up in turnover or revenues. And our members, by becoming members, they gain access to what I would qualify as a distinguished global community of fellow business leaders. And they're going to mutually benefit from one another in this atmosphere that we've created of growth, success, and transformation. Ultimately, if we succeed, I'd like to think that what we're doing is connecting the connected and inspiring the inspired to really open up the world to our members in ways that they haven't necessarily experienced before.
Interesting. So I have the opportunity of being a part of Corporate Connections, and absolutely, I think that it's a great organization where leaders are able to connect and share valuable information about their business and also some of their personal lives. So share with us what the purpose of Corporate Connections is.
Yeah, so our purpose is kind of building off what I just said previously, but it's to connect leaders around the world and empower them to create opportunities and meaningful change in their organizations, communities, and lives. So really a 360 approach to helping transform and accelerate the path that people are on. Generally, the people who come to us are people who are already very successful in their own right. I would even argue that they don't necessarily need us, but that they join Corporate Connections because it's going to help accelerate whatever path they're on, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. I can tell you, as the guy who gets to run this, gets to travel across the globe and meet our members, our directors, and all the people involved, it's just a real privilege to be surrounded by these people who I would often qualify as the good citizens of the world in many ways. People who are very successful, but who give back.
Absolutely. I heard you, mention something really interesting a few years ago, right? You mentioned redefining human connectivity. Describe to us what that means.
Yeah, so at its core, what we do in principle is very simple. And by connecting people together, networking effectively, really what we're doing is something that's been around since the dawn of humanity. We come into communities, we band together to help each other. If you go far enough back, it was probably a question of safety, security, and survival. And as we move forward, it's to often, I think, leverage each other's skills, expertise, connections. And I think when we talk about, and maybe, redefining is an ambitious statement, as I said, this is not as something that is not known to people. And I think the last 2 years, with everything that we face in the world, I think we've probably really realized the importance of that human connectivity even more than we probably did beforehand. And when we talk about redefining, I think it's what you see with a lot of organizations and networking organizations, it is focused specifically on business, creating business opportunities, or on learning, or on the social aspect. So they tend to go into these silos, which is really not who we are as humans. As humans, we're complex beings. We have a lot of wants and needs and desires and passions and ambitions. So when we created Corporate Connections, which has been around for some time now, we really kind of looked at what's the best of the best out there and how do people actually interact with each other? And is there a way to create a member experience that's going to really redefine how we do this type of organization? That's going to have that true 360 global approach to who we are as complex beings, and to allow us not only to connect with each other across the globe and break down barriers, but to also achieve all of those different elements and desires that we have in our lives. And I believe that's what we've done. And now, of course, with the advent of technology in the last 20 years, that has further transformed how we can do it, our reach, how effective we can be. And again, just in the past year and a half, we've seen our transition accelerate with the pandemic, accelerate how we communicate and connect. That I really think we have now redefined how we all connect across the globe. And maybe, and I think a lot of people know this, but sometimes we forget, one of the beautiful things out of all of this is as we connect across the globe, of course, we realize how we're all the same. We have the same desires and needs. We want to take care of our families, our communities. By creating this global community, we're breaking down some of those barriers, those preconceived notions, and hopefully changing the world a little bit every day in the right direction.
I think, love when you mentioned, that Corporate Connections has a 360, global approach. And I think that is absolutely key for all business leaders. And it's great to hear that is what you're aiming for. And that is what you're constantly doing in your organization to make that experience a holistic approach for all members. You've alluded to this, to part of this question in the first question I asked you, but if you may expand just on a little bit more for our audience, so tell us the type of business leader, again, executive that joins Corporate Connections. And if you can expand on what is, the true value that they get.
Yeah, so I would say it's forward-looking business executives and owners and leaders. So these are people who, obviously, I think to be successful in business, generally you have a certain type of ambition and desire. And then you get to a point in your career often where, not that it necessarily stagnates, but you get to a level of comfort and success where you start wondering about the next thing or the next challenge, or how do I leverage what I've succeeded in building to create more value for other people, other organizations, or other communities. So that ambition evolves as we get more established and have success. And our audience, of course, are people who by default have had a certain level of success. So these people often, as I mentioned, they're decision makers in that sort of mid to large range. And again, It's kind of amazing. A lot of people will say, well, 5 million doesn't seem like a huge revenue number, but that's only about 4.5% of companies globally ever hit that threshold. So it is a rather thin strip of businesses across the globe. Generally, people are extremely busy, don't have time. They're very involved in community. They give back in various ways. They're on boards. They want to grow. They want to contribute. They're often natural mentors, help other people already, whether in a structured way or unstructured. And they also recognize that there's always room to improve and grow. So they're looking to meet the right people in the right context, to make smarter decisions faster, to experience the extraordinary in ways that they may have not experienced otherwise. And part of what we do by helping filter the membership as people come in and having this clear criteria of who can join, we've made it really easy for them to start building those trust long-term relationships. So when they join, some of the benefits is that we are helping them build relationships that matter. We are our structure. We have 20 plus meetings per year in each chapter where they focus on creating business opportunities or other types of opportunities for each other. So whether it's their business, again, personal life, community, they're going to experience the extraordinary, whether it's going to events or in one-to-one meetings with people around the world, where again, we skip some of those steps that hey, how's the weather? We go beyond that. We get beyond the surface and we get into real topics that mean more for each and every one of us. Then we have an element of our program, which is the forum. And the forum allows people really to make smarter decisions faster, but it also allows you to connect with other people at a level of depth that we rarely do in our lives. So it is about creating those meaningful moments, those meaningful relationships that will last a lifetime. And it's about, I believe, doing this in such a way that it's fun, that people want to do it. And when they walk out of the room, they go, wow, this is a remarkable place to be and a remarkable place to meet great people.
So Corporate Connections is a business networking organization. There are there are other organizations or other business networking organizations who are at the same time soliciting similar businesses and individuals, like EO, YPO, Target 21, Vistage. Some are more established or are larger. Tell us the reasons someone would consider, Corporate Connections versus one of these other business networking organizations.
Yeah, and I should point out a lot of these organizations, they're absolutely terrific organizations. So, and I've had the privilege of meeting the CEOs of some of these organizations. I've even been really discussing how we can help each other. So there's I think there's a lot of room in the world, organizations that help connect good people together and create good things. And based on our own growth, I mean, we've grown over 50% just since January 1st of this year. So in the last 10 months, we see that there's a lot of room for all of us. But and when I get asked this question, and I've been a member of some of these other organizations in the past, and when I get asked why Corporate Connections, what I find interesting is a lot of these organizations are still focused on one or two or three of the silos. They don't really combine all of them. So for example, some of the organizations you mentioned, it's frowned upon if you do business with each other or if you send business to each other. Now, there's a reason for that. They're concerned that if the business goes sideways, if it doesn't work out as hoped, that this is going to sour the relationship and make it more difficult for them to collaborate, learn from each other, and work together in all the other ways that a lot of these organizations really try to create. But we take a slightly different angle. I'm a big believer, I'm a big proponent of the fact that, for example, if you and I, Domenic, we can be in a forum group, let's say, we could be helping each other in our communities, and we can also do business together, and we can separate the different elements. We're mature enough. We have the ability to discuss things, I think, in a rational manner. And part of that is accepting the right people into these groups. But another part of it is trusting that our members will deal with some of these potential conflicts as they arise. And what that does, it really allows us, and the challenge is, if you put 20 top executives in a room and you tell them not to do business together, it's difficult to manage that, because by our very nature, we want to build. So you put them in a room, it's going to happen. So we chose to take a slightly different approach and say, hey, we're not just going to focus on one element. We're going to encourage the business. And that one element really differentiates us from the rest.
You know what, Robert, thank you for giving us a 360-degree perspective of corporate connections. So,
it's a pleasure.
So now moving on to the power of the close. So many sales leaders and professionals avoid asking their client for a commitment. Make us understand, Robert, the importance of asking for a commitment from the client before providing them with a formal proposal.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I think, first of all, a lot of people are not comfortable with sales. And I'd like to think good sales, you're not actually selling anything. You're presenting an opportunity that obviously, I think any good salesperson would have to believe in what they're offering. So that you're presenting an opportunity and you're trying to find the right person at the right time who's going to get value from that opportunity. Now, the sales process can be pretty arduous. Often you need to meet a lot of people to find the right person at the right time or the right organization. You need to have someone who sees the value, who has an ability financially to invest in whatever solution it is you're bringing to the table. So whether it's a good or a service. And often salespeople will waste a lot of time. I remember when I was young, and I've been in sales my entire life, it was the old adage was what you really want is a quick yes, and then maybe a slow yes, excuse me. But the one thing you don't want is a slow no, right? The worst thing someone can do is say, well, sure, give me more information, when they already know they're going to say no, but they don't know how to say no to you. So by getting them to commit upfront in some way, psychologically, you're helping them make that decision early in the sales process. And that's going to help you manage your time, manage the investment you're putting into creating that relationship and investing towards hopefully building a long-term vendor-client relationship. So it gives them an opportunity, one, psychologically to make a decision early on, and two, hopefully it leads to a successful close versus a slow no. Now, in my case, part of what we do at Corporate Connections, it's a franchise-based organization. So I meet a lot of people, and I'm not the head of franchise sales, but I'm very involved in the franchise sales. And when we sit down with someone, we will often walk them through some of our own key criteria for them to become our customer. So they need to have an ability to do this full-time in effort or have a partner who does. If they can't, we want to know who the partner is up front. Have they thought of them? Have they talked to them? Before we go any further, have they actually established who this is going to be? We want to meet them. We want to know if this is going to make sense, if it's going to fit. We want to know if they have the financial ability to invest into our business, which, effectively they're our client. We want to make sure they can afford our solution. Because if they can't, let's not waste time for anyone up front. And I like to think of, by doing this, by getting this commitment up front, it's respect for all parties. Because if you're going to drag your feet or they're going to drag their feet and we're wasting each other's time, it's really a loss for everyone. So depending on whatever business you're in, I think you need to establish what are those minimum standards, that minimum commitment you need to go to the next step where you do, and you ask for it. And it's amazing when you ask someone, they will let you know. They will let you know if they're ready to move forward or if they're not and why. And now that gives you the opportunity to understand where you stand with that potential client in that potential sale. You can either adjust or walk away from it if you know that you can't meet their requirements at that stage.
I love what you mentioned at the end, right? Ask for it, right? Ask for the sale. I think there's still a lot of sales professionals out there. They do such a great job presenting, asking questions, but still afraid of asking for the sale. So great advice there, Robert. So the second question on closing, as sales leaders and professionals, it's important to understand how to effectively handle client objections. According to you, what advice would you give salespeople on the topic of objection handling?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I will argue that inefficient salespeople don't listen to the customer or the potential customer. People that we're selling to will guide us in what it is they're looking for. They generally won't sit down with you trying to make you lose the sale. They want to get it to a close. If they're sitting down with you, more often than not, it's because they believe you may be providing a solution to a challenge they have. So when they're objecting, it's not that they're saying you're not the right solution. It's not that they're saying you can't fulfill my need. They're expressing their own challenges. They're expressing the things that probably frustrate them or their fears about your solution. So I'm a huge believer that you need to really actively listen to what the person is saying. And sometimes they may not say it directly, hence the active listening. You need to dig a little bit. It's a bit of forensic listening. You're trying to figure out what exactly are they actually telling me? Because sometimes they may not even know, right? It's a frustration that's coming out. It's being expressed a certain way as an objection. But when you listen to them, you realize that what they're actually saying may be referring to a specific attribute or a part of your solution that you haven't discussed, or it's really complaining about another solution they've used in the past that didn't meet their needs. So I think right away, by actively listening and then being sure that you do not exaggerate what you can do. And I think that's the natural inclination. You want to please the person, you want to get the deal. So the natural inclination is like, oh yeah, we can take care of that. But it's really important not to do that. So often I'll have a potential member approach me and say, I remember a lawyer did this years ago, and a senior partner in a law firm, and he said, I'd like to get 5 million in revenues from my membership in the next 12 months. Now, this is a person who bills his time. I said, well, how much did you bill last year? Now he's got a team, so who knows, maybe it was possible. And he had billed probably about 1.2, 1.3 million. Now, again, for a team. And I said, well, how do you go from 1.2, 1.3, and you tell me you work 70 hours a week to an additional 5 million? And the second we broke it down, it became very apparent, very clear that that was absolutely impossible. So that's the other thing. By listening, you'll often see if it's realistic what they're asking for, if it's doable. And then by having an open conversation, you talk about what will happen, what you will be able to resolve, what value you will be able to bring. And as you have that discussion, and I'm very comfortable telling people, that's not going to happen, or we can't do that, or that is not what our product or service does, but this is how we can help you. And hopefully that this is going to take you part of the way, if not all of the way, to where you need to get. These 1 or 2 elements, which, let's be very open about it, we're not going to do those, but I don't think that that's going to have necessarily negative impact on what we're bringing to the table. So not an easy conversation, sometimes uncomfortable, but I think if you do that, you're building a trust foundation on which you can build a long-term relationship. And I've had clients, and I used to own an IT company, and I remember one of them, I told them exactly what all the risks were of the solution that they were choosing with us. And I told them what would happen. And I said, there's another solution, which is a bigger investment. And they didn't go with the bigger investment. And then when some of the things I said came true, they weren't upset because they had made the decision themselves. They had understood what the risks were. They had understood the limitations. And then we had that kind of relationship where we could talk about the next stage. So important to be honest up front, to listen, and to really hear what it is we're sharing with you.
You're absolutely right. One important takeaway from what from your comments and your insights is, to become great in objection handling, you have to become an expert in listening, or more importantly, active listening. So thank you for that.
And one thing I'll add to that, Domenic, I think if you do your homework before you go in, if you understand, about this particular business, if you understand their industry, some of the challenges they're facing as an industry, that also helps you prepare. So we call it in our business, we call it a rodeo. So before we'll bring something to market, we'll have a number of our own team members, and it's like riding the bull for 8 seconds. They're gonna come and challenge us. They're gonna be the toughest client we could possibly face. So they challenge us, test us, ask us the hard questions. And what that really does is it also helps us prepare for the objections when we go out to the field. Because we've faced the toughest. It's like when you train to go climb Everest, you train for a long time, you get into the best health, you train at high altitude, so that hopefully by the time you get there, there's no surprise when you're actually on the mountain. You're as prepared as you possibly can.
You're absolutely right. I always say that sales, is a contact sport, and the only key to survive and to win is to be, preparation is key, and to practice. So you're absolutely right. So moving on to the last question. I often ask sales professionals if they really know, their competitors, and it always makes me chuckle, when they answer by saying, the only competition they have or is in front of the mirror. So being more serious here, right? Regardless of if we think we are unique and that we have no competition, the reality is that there are competitors all around us.
Yep.
I'm curious, with your sales experience, Robert, how do you approach the topic of competitors with your clients?
Yeah, so I usually come in with a table of who I consider to be our competition. And what are those differentiators between us and the competition? And one thing I never want to do is diminish competition. I don't think that it's a healthy way of selling. I think you want to say, hey, this is what competition is good at. Here are some third party, and I won't put just the negative reviews. You want to try to have the most objective possible picture of, like, if they're going to going here, that's great. Established company. They're going to get, one of the biggest players in the world. They're going to bring, these different types of value. However, what we bring is perhaps a boutique approach. You're going to have a relationship with the individual who's going to be managing your account every day. It's going to be a white glove treatment, concierge type service, versus, let's say, a huge company that maybe has a large amount of assets and investment and publicly funded, but that also creates limitations. So again, it's about figuring out what is our strength compared to the competition, and really get them to understand that this is why I'm sitting in front of you. This is why I think we're the best solution. And I'm going to let the person decide. I'm not going to tell them that we're the best solution. I'm going to tell them why I think we're the best solution and why I choose to sell this product at this time to you. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, and I've shared this story with you in the past, Domenic, I've had a number of companies. So I was in film and television production. I was in technology. I've had restaurants. Now I'm running this organization out of the US. So I've seen all types of competition. I've raised money a number of times. And I remember going to a seed investor who had invested in a number of companies that I'd had. And I asked them to invest in this concept. And this was around 99. And it's just as the tech bubble was coming to its bursting point, but not yet. And I approached him, and we had what I thought was a pretty brilliant idea. And he said, who are your competitors? And I said, as far as we know, there are none. And we'd done research. And he said, well, either you're a unicorn, and he said there are very few of those in the world, or you're underestimating what's out there. But if you're a unicorn, it's going to ask for a lot of investment. There's a lot of risk in working with a unicorn because nobody else is developing it. So I'm stuck with you if something goes wrong. So I've always believed if I think there's no competition, one, I'm probably wrong and I need to do more research. And two, it's actually a risk to go to someone and say that there is no competition because competition is healthy. Competition keeps us on our toes. Competition keeps us honest. It keeps helping us innovate and progress because we need to stay ahead of the competition. So competition is not a bad thing. And most buyers see competition as being healthy when they're buying from you. So I would say, don't shy away from it. Lean into it. Lean into who that competition is. Get to know them in every which way possible. And when you walk in there, you can talk about them in an intelligent way and differentiate yourself, but in a way that really highlights how great you are and not necessarily why someone else is not good. And that's, again, it's a tricky balancing act. If you do that effectively, I think you'll have the respect of the customer or the potential customer, and they're going to want to do business with you even more.
Robert, you're absolutely right. I think eliminating the competition is crucial. However, it's important to do it in a very professional and ethical way. So, Robert, thank you for all those great insights. So, Robert, it was a pleasure having you as our guest today. For all our attendees to know more about corporate connections and how Robert and his team may help you be part of a premier business networking organization, Robert's contact information will be appearing on the screen at the end of the show. Hey, thank you again, Robert.
Thank you, Domenic, and please feel free to reach out to me. Always happy to talk about corporate connections and how we might be able to help each other. And Domenic, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on today.
You're welcome. So once again, I would like to thank everyone for attending our podcast today. Please stay tuned for our next podcast, where we will bring you another industry leader who is creating tremendous value and growth and creating, in their own way, phenomenal and legendary results. To learn more on how we are creating sales legends, please click on the link below to access free training to help you achieve sales legend status and to learn more about the Ultimate Sales Legend program. Once again, thank you, and keep striving to be phenomenal and legendary.